Here we go. Today is February 16th, 2021. I am Kishana Soldier, and we are interviewing Dennis as part of the African American Oral History Project. So the first question is, can you state your name, please?
Sure. My name is Dennis Richmond Jr., DennisRichmond, because a lot of people think when I say Richmond, it's MAN, but it's MOND, and it's Dennis with two N's, not one.
Perfect. We'll use that for labeling. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Yonkers, New York, specifically in the north side of Yonkers, which someone would consider to be the north side on Lake Avenue. I was there from 1996 until 2018.
And who did you grow up with as far as family, relatives, or close family friends?
I grew up with both of my parents, Dennis Richmond Sr. and Mr. Dennis Richmond Sr. and Mrs. Hortina Richmond, and my two siblings, Denise Richmond and Shanice Richmond. And at the time, my niece, Alasia, and my nephew, Tracy. Alasia was my only niece at the time.
Now, any more relatives that you're sort of in the vicinity of Yonkers?
Yes, within the last 3 years, my family welcomed my beautiful baby niece, Aaliyah. So when she sees this in the future, Leah, a key. Every time I say that to her, it's something that I do to her. I say that to her all the time for her reaction, because she always says, "Stop it, DJ." So I always do that. Family-wise, yes, my father has a sister named Charlene. That's my auntie Sha. And for a point in time, she was in Yonkers. Her sons, my two first cousins, Warren and Michael, were in Yonkers as well. So I grew up with a lot of family around.
And what schools did you attend in Yonkers?
I attended Padilla School number 24 on 50 Collins Street. Why do I know the address? Who knows? But I attended Padilla School number 24 on 50 Collins Street. I attended Museum Middle School on 565 Warburton Avenue. And I attended Riverside High School, which was also on 565 Warburton Avenue. For those who do not know, Riverside High School used to be Museum Middle School.
And do you mind sort of recalling any memories you have growing up or to the present of the neighborhood you grew up in Yonkers?
Sure, my neighborhood was beautiful. I grew up in a 4 to 5 bedroom home with 2 bathrooms. It was really big. We had a big backyard with a huge rock in the center of it, and we lived on a dead end. There was no commotion in the neighborhood that I lived in Yonkers because of the fact that it was a dead end. And when it snowed, it was absolutely terrible. You either had to park on the top of the hill or on the bottom of the hill. But you would be darned, for a better choice of words, to park in front of your home on Lake Avenue when it snowed, especially if you knew it was going to snow. I have seen more cars get stuck on Lake Avenue than probably most chefs have seen food in kitchens. It was terrible. So, so crazy. So yeah, that's definitely how that was growing up there. School experiences, I had nothing but wonderful experiences in elementary school. It wasn't until middle school that I had begun to get bullied. And unfortunately, the bullies were not people who wanted the best for me. They were just genuinely angry with who I was, because I know for a fact that I spoke proper and that I loved school. And I went to school with a lot of people who looked down on speaking proper and who looked down on formal education. So that's how that went. But as far as my experiences growing up in Yonkers, outside of middle school, everything was fantastic. I had a beautiful family, and I still have a beautiful family. I had support from my community, and I still have support from my community. And I loved to be in New York, and I still love to be in New York. It's New York.
And did you attend any church or place of worship in Yonkers? And if you did, would you be able to share a bit about that experience?
I did not attend any churches or places of worship in Yonkers.
And were there any places that you regularly visited in Yonkers? Any landmarks or sort of places that mean a lot to you? And if so, do you want to talk a bit about them?
Sure. Growing up in Yonkers, every weekend, my mother would always take me around New York. We would go everywhere: White Plains, Mount Vernon, Rye. It depended on the errands that we had to run. I often remember going to cross county with my family. That was always an experience. Now I'm 26 years old and I remember the semi-old cross county. There are people older than me who remember a cross county that can go back to places like Gimbels. I don't remember cross county like that. But the cross county I remember had Walden's Books, and we would go into Walden's bookstore. I'm a nerd, for a better choice of words. I love to read. We would go into Walden's Books. You used to have oh my goodness, what was it? There was a cookie store, Mrs. Smith's Cookies. Oh my God. The chocolate fudge brownies were to die for. I love chocolate. The old Cross County was beautiful. I remember going to Cross County very often. And I remember the pier when I was in high school, going to the pier in downtown Yonkers, back before it looked like what it did now, when it was the hangout spot for all high school students. I often remember proms taking place at the pier because that was the place to go for prom. You had to show off and go to the pier and then be late to your prom because that's what you did. I was on time. I was one of maybe 5 students, and you can quote me, who was on time to my prom. Everybody got there late because they said that was the thing to do. I was not cool like that. I got there on time. So yeah, that's how that went down. Definitely Cross County though, Cross County and Central Avenue. I would go all around with my mother and my niece on Saturdays, and Sundays it would be all around New York City with my dad. I often remember him taking me to the Bronx to see a lot of his relatives there. So I would be with mom on Saturdays and dad would be at work, and then mom would be working from home on Sundays and dad would have me around the city.
Great. And you sort of began to talk about this, but what are some things you enjoy doing in your free time, either in Yonkers or in New York State in general?
Sure. So prior to the age of 13, I always enjoyed writing. That was always something that I did in my free time. I have writings and things that I've made going back to elementary school. I love to write, and I still do love to write. After the age of 13, so it was in March of 2008, shortly after my 13th birthday, which was in February 11th. It was on February 11th. I knew that I had an interest for genealogy, and I started researching my family history. So from the age of 13 to today, I always was researching. I was in someone's archive. I was in somebody's library. I was always finding something, looking for documents and what have you that pertain to my family. So it was always research. If I wasn't writing and if I wasn't researching, then I was traveling somewhere. I was on the 5 bus going to White Plains or the 7 bus going to New Rochelle.
And you shared some beautiful photos of your family, but are you able to talk a bit about sort of the history of your family, both in Yonkers and Westchester County in general?
Most definitely. So my mother's side of the family hails from South Carolina, and my father's side of the family is from Westchester County, New York. So to make it short and sweet, I'll start from way back and then work my way towards me. So my 6 times great grandmother, so my great 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 grandmother was named Margaret. Her nickname was Peg, and she was born around the year 1770. So during the Revolutionary War, she was a young child. You would figure that her mother and father would have been around her during this time. Now, she had had 6 sons. One of her sons was named Charles Merritt, and he was born May 1791. He had a brother named Jack, who was born on Valentine's Day, February 14th, 1793. I have it all committed to memory. 1793. Charles and Jack, just like their mother, were born into slavery. Margaret had received her freedom in April of 1800 from a man by the name of Benjamin Woolsey Lyon. Charles, because of the laws that Connecticut had at the time, did not receive his freedom. So him and his brother had to remain enslaved until they had a certain birthday. Charles married a woman by the name of Catherine, and they had children, one of whom was named Abraham. That's my ancestor. So if you follow me, we go from Margaret, who was called Peg, who's my 6 times great grandmother, to Charles, who was my 5 times great grandfather, to Abraham, who was my 4th times great grandfather. Abraham was born around 1823, and Abraham and Charles were both born in Greenwich, Connecticut. Abraham was also called Abram, Abram, and he was born free, roughly 40 some odd years before the end of the Civil War. So it often baffles me that I have family who were Black, who are Black, who were quasi-free Blacks walking around the antebellum North who did not have shackles on their feet and shackles on their wrists. Grandpa Abraham, like his father, also, well, Grandpa Abraham, like his father, had been a farmer. They were farmers and laborers, and they worked extremely hard. They were property owners. They believed in owning property. They believed that it was important to be self-sufficient, and they were family men. They always had the hard work label attached to what they do. Abraham married a woman by the name of Huldah Peck, who was the daughter of George Peck and Nancy Falmetta. The Falmetta family is one of the oldest Black families of Greenwich, which go back to African, European, and indigenous roots. Their indigenous roots go back to the Mohawk. Grandpa Abraham and Grandma Huldah had a few children, one of whom was named Edward B. Merritt. Grandpa Edward is my third, so great-great-great-grandfather. Grandpa Edward was born around 1871 in Port Chester, New York, and he was, from what I was able to find, one of the only Black men in the late 1800s, early 1900s who worked in real estate. And in his obituary, he died in 1901 at the age of 31 years old. They actually mentioned that he worked in a real estate office. Crazy to me that a Black man in 1901 was working in a real estate office when majority of Black men were working in cotton fields and hauling tobacco. My great-great-grandfather was named John Sherman Merritt. He was the son of Edward B. Merritt and Mary Elizabeth Roselle. Grandpa John was born December the 28th, 1889 in Greenwich, Connecticut, and he believed in hard work. He believed in hard work because that's what was taught to him by his family, and he believed in hard work so much that when he married the beautiful Lelia Bell Robinson from Staunton, Virginia, he didn't want her to have to work. They had 4 children. Their children's names were Lelia May Merritt, Joseph Francis Merritt, James Glover Merritt, and my great-grandmother, Adele Matilda Merritt. And for every child that they had, John picked up another job. He was a laborer, a housekeeper, he was a school custodian, and a chimney sweep. He didn't want his wife to have to work. She wanted him to slow down, but he didn't think that it was her place to work. In an era when most of the people who were house cleaning were Black women, he was a house cleaner. His uncle, Joseph Glover, had a house cleaning business. So he worked with his uncle. His father, Edward B. Merritt, died at 31 years old, and unfortunately, so did he. And on his death certificate, it reads that he died of exhaustion. He literally worked himself to death. A Black man died in 1921 during the beginning of the Harlem Renaissance, who happens to be my great-great-grandfather, because he didn't want my great-great-grandmothers to have to work. Their daughter, Adele Matilda Merritt, is my great-grandmother, and she was born in Greenwich, Connecticut. However, she was the person who moved my family from Connecticut to New York. It was her family, so Grandma Adele and her parents moved from Greenwich, Connecticut to New Rochelle, New York, and that's when the story begins in New Rochelle, and that was around 1929, 1930. So with that being said, Grandma Adele had grown up to be not only a beautiful woman, just like all of the women in my family, but she had grown up to be a baby nurse, geriatric, awesome. And she was the mother of my grandmother, Joyce Marie Watkins, who was born in 1937, July 1937, in Greenwich, but was raised in New Rochelle and had attended Albert Leonard Middle School in New Rochelle, and all of the family came through New Rochelle High School. And then, of course, there's my dad, Dennis Richmond Sr., who was born in 1955, who now lives in New York City. And then, boom, there's me, and here I am.
That is an amazing family history, even, that predates freedom, that really sort of traces the long roots within your family, both in Connecticut, but also in present day Yonkers. And one of the things that you were able to sort of weave was sort of talking about the impact of history, but also racism, especially within your own family. So for yourself, have you ever had to encounter any racism or prejudice, whether in Yonkers, in Westchester, or just in your everyday interactions?
As beautiful as Yonkers is as a city, the majority of people who live in Yonkers know of its history with racism and prejudice. And being a young Black man, not in Yonkers, but just a young Black man in America, period, I have encountered racism before. The racism that I've encountered or the prejudice that I've encountered in Yonkers has never been 100% in your face racism, but rather it's subtle, and someone even argued that it's systemic. So it's never anything directly to your face, but it's enough for you to be able to know that it's there. Racism and prejudice in Yonkers have changed a lot throughout the past 15 to 20 years. I do remember of some racist things taking place when I was younger, but as far as me waking up having to deal with racism or see it every day in this particular city, then no. Is it here? Yes. I would say that often people get racism confused with a difference of political opinion. So if you see some lawns that say Biden Harris and other lawns that say Trump Pence, people automatically assume, oh, they're not racist, but they are, which isn't the case. People believe in what they believe in politically. But again, as far as racism in my face 100%, no. But I do remember racist things happening. I'll share with you. I remember once upon a time when I was about 5 or 6 years old, me and my father were walking outside of his car to go inside of a gas station to pay for gas. And as we were walking, we walked past a car, and there was a woman who was not of color in the car. And she looked at me and my dad and then locked her doors. And I saw the expression on my dad's face when that happened. And I was quite young to understand what it was, but she might have thought that we were a threat. So when she saw it, she felt that she needed to lock her doors.
And, you know, one of the things that you spoke a bit about earlier was sort of the impact and change over time. So, though you were too young to participate in things like the civil rights movement, you were at an age where you could participate in Black Lives Matter protests
Mhm.
and the movement in general. If you have any involvement, I'd love for you to share, or if you have any opinions about it, I'd love for you to share.
Sure. I had first gotten involved with activism, so to speak, in 2013 after the Zimmerman trial with the Trayvon Martin incident. And I had led a rally in Yonkers. I led a beautiful march, and there were hundreds of people who were there. News 12 was there. I was on TV, and I voiced my opinion because I wanted people to know that Yonkers did not and will not, that Yonkers, New York did not and will not forget about Trayvon Martin. So that was awesome. So 2013 is when I first got into activism. It was in during what I like to call the Black Revolution, but a few months ago in the height of the Black Lives Matter experiences that took place across the country that I spoke up along with a lot of my peers and a lot of community leaders, community activists, and I voiced my opinion. And I remember I was a part of a few demonstrations that took place. I was a part of one in Yonkers, I was a part of one in Mount Vernon, and it was powerful and it was important. And I say it was powerful because to see many people stick together and they didn't all look the same. They all had different sexual orientations, they had different genders, they had different socioeconomic statuses, but they stood together because they knew what the bigger picture was. It was beautiful. And the fact that I was a part of that is something that I will never forget because you need to stand for something. And standing for something doesn't necessarily mean, so to your point, when you said, talk about that and how I felt about that, not everyone has to march up and down the street. Your role might be the one to make sure that everyone doesn't have grammatical errors on their social media posts before they post them. Your role might be making sure that with your PhD or your EDD or your MSED, you are the one who's teaching the right curriculum and making sure that we have the correct pedagogy in classes so that way we know what we need to teach. Your role might be to make sure that you change the music that you rap about or sing about so that way it's a little bit more political in the sense of you're helping to free people as opposed to helping them feel as if they're helpless. So everyone has a different role. And I would like to think that within these past few months or even the past year, people have come to realize, hopefully, what their role is in the movement, regardless of their color, regardless of their sexual orientation, and regardless of what they think they don't have and what they think they can't do. But we all have talents, and if you use them for the benefit of other people, and we all do that, then how could we fail?
So, speaking to talents, but also sort of individualism, what does Black History Month mean to you? And are there any figures throughout history that have had a personal impact on you and your journey so far?
Sure. To me, Black History Month means celebrating who I am, and not only celebrating who I am, but the world being able to see who I am. Often people will say every month is Black History Month, or we don't need Black History Month, or Black History Month is the shortest month of the year. But when you look at the history of it, no one had woke up and said, boom, Black History Month is a thing. It started, of course, we know from Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who many would call the father of Black history, who started Negro History Week. And then it became what it is today. Negro History Week and Black History Month, we know, were started not because February is the shortest month of the year, but because of the birthdays of Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. So there's a science behind why it is. Black History Month to me means celebrating who I am and other people acknowledging and celebrating along with me who I am, my culture, what it means to be Black, what it means to be me. I know as far as figures go, the majority of figures that I look up to in Black history aren't those who you can find in a textbook yet, and they aren't those who you can Google and find Wikipedia pages about yet. Because I look up to my great-great-grandfather, John Sherman Merritt, who worked so hard that he died of exhaustion. I look up to people like my ancestor, who's on my mother's side, Rosalie Bowens Dingle, who worked to provide not only for her children, but for her grandchildren too, because she knew that they would have better and that she knew that they should have better than what she had. So it's not just for me, the people that we can find online. It's the people in my family who I know for a fact have made it possible for me to be able to do an interview like this, to be able to say that I have a bachelor's degree from an HBCU and a master's degree from Sarah Lawrence. I didn't just happen to fall into the place that I am. I'm here because of prayers from many Black people whose names I know and majority of Black people whose names I do not know. I'm here because not only did they pray, but they believed in what they were praying for so much that they didn't stop and they didn't let it affect them in their daily lives, but they kept going and they didn't stop and they didn't want to stop. That's what Black History Month means to me. It means acknowledging the people who made it possible for me to be here. Now, yes, you have wonderful people whose speeches I have listened to countless times, who I will forever big up in the broader scheme of Black history, like the Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey, or Dr. Huey Percy Newton, or El Haj Malik Shabazz, who we know as Malcolm X. But it's also the people in my family who have made it possible for Dennis to be Dennis, who I couldn't wake up and not acknowledge.
In your work as an activist, as a genealogist, these are all amazing things, but are there any other community service projects that you've dedicated yourself to, either in Yonkers or even outside of Yonkers, just given all of the things that you do in the community?
Most definitely. I'm the founder and director of the New York, New Jersey HBCU initiative. I believe that it is extremely important for students all across the country to know their college options. It's important that students know about whether or not they want to go to Sarah Lawrence or whether or not they want to go to Claflin University. And I feel as if I am one of the people who is well equipped, who has enough experience, and who has hosted enough events to be able to speak on the fact that all students should be able to have college options. When you go to a store, you shouldn't be told that you can only order one thing. You look at a menu, and we don't do a good service to students when we don't give them a menu. So it's not about creating a pipeline from one school to another, but it's about letting students know, hey, you can go here or here, but just know that you have a bunch of other schools here. And as we talk about Black History Month, why not pick up the HBCUs, the historically Black colleges and universities? Because before we could attend a lot of the PWIs or majority institutions that we attend today, all we had was Howard University and South Carolina State. All we had was Meharry and Fisk. All we had was Spelman, and all we had was Tuskegee. So let's not forget the schools that made it possible for us to be able to be here today.
So that's actually the end of all of my questions regarding sort of the oral history project, but I did want to give you an opportunity to share anything else about your family history, your activism, your work as a genealogist, or about Black History Month and as its impact in Yonkers.
Sure. The only other thing that I would like to say is that no matter who you are, no matter what you do, no matter where you're from, always be you, because no one is going to be a better you than you. A lot of people like to imitate other people. a lot of people think that it's cool to try to act like other people, but in order for you to be truly genuine, you have to be yourself. When people see Dennis Richmond Jr., what you see is what you get. I am who I am, and I can't change that. I don't go into any arena trying to pretend that I'm someone that I'm not. I am Dennis Richmond Jr. from Yonkers, New York, and I'm Dennis and Tina's son. That's who I am. I'm Shanice and Denise's little brother. I'm Michael and Warren. I'm Gutter and Goldie little cousin. That's who I am, and that's it. So always be yourself. I don't have anything else to say about any of the work that I do or about any of my educational experiences or what have you. But if I could end with anything, I would want to say be you, because no one can be a better you than you. It's Yonkers, these horns in the background. No one can be a better you than you. And that's all I would say.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your story. And I'm really excited for everyone else to be able to hear your story. So thank you again, Dennis.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited. I'm just a 26-year-old from Yonkers who's trying to make a change. So I love the fact that some people see that.